All right, ready to tackle some big questions? Like, what does freedom really mean? And are we actually as in control of our lives as we think we are? We're diving into Erich Fromm's Beyond the Chains of Illusion, and this book, it kind of blows your mind a little bit. I mean, he's going after some seriously heavy hitters, Marx, Freud, societal norms, and makes you realize how all these forces we barely even notice are shaping our choices.
Fromm was a genius at bringing together these different fields, philosophy, psychology, social commentary, and making them relevant to our lives. It's not just theory. He wants us to use these ideas to understand ourselves better.
So let's start with Fromm's own intellectual journey, right? He kind of lays it all out there, Western and Eastern thought, his Jewish heritage, and then throws in Marx and Freud. It's like he's building this foundation for something really big.
And what's so cool is that he doesn't pit these thinkers against each other. It's not like Marx versus Freud, fight T. He sees them as two sides of the same coin, each shedding light on different aspects of this struggle for freedom.
See, I've always thought of Marx and Freud as kind of opposing forces. So how does seeing them as complementary change how we understand that human struggle?
Well, Marx is all about those external forces,
Yeah.
the economic systems, the power dynamics, the stuff that makes us feel alienated from our work, from each other. He's basically saying, hey, the system itself is designed to keep us down.
Okay, so that's one set of chains, right?
Yeah.
The external pressures that limit our choices.
Right. And then Freud comes in with the internal stuff.
Yeah.
Our unconscious desires, all the baggage we carry from our childhoods. It's like he's saying, sometimes we're our own worst enemies.
So we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, pressure from society, and these inner forces we don't even fully understand. No wonder we feel stuck.
Exactly. And Fromm takes both of these perspectives and weeds them into this idea of freedom. He calls it negative freedom, basically, being free from constraints.
Like when you finally quit that soul-crushing job, right? That feeling of, yes, I'm out. That's a taste of negative freedom, escaping a constraint. But Fromm is saying, what do you do with that freedom?
Yeah, that's where positive freedom comes in. It's not just about breaking free from things, but about actively shaping your life, making choices that are really in line with who you are, what you value.
So it's less about running away from something and more about running towards something, a life that feels authentic and meaningful.
Exactly. But here's the catch. Fromm argues that achieving this positive freedom is actually harder than it sounds because we're constantly being bombarded with messages that undermine our ability to choose freely.
This is where that whole marketing personality thing comes in, right? Wait, does Fromm actually think we become products? I'm not sure I totally get that.
He's saying that in a consumer society, we start to see ourselves as commodities,
Hmm.
always striving to improve our market value,
Mhm.
our looks, our status, our achievements, the whole package.
It's like we're always trying to sell ourselves to the world instead of connecting with who we really are inside.
And the danger is that we end up chasing external validation instead of what truly fulfills us. We become slaves to trends and expectations and lose touch with our authentic selves.
So how do we break free from this trap? Fromson has to offer some hope here, right?
He does, and might not be what you expect. He talks about love, but not just romantic love. This seems much bigger, like a love that fuels social action. Am I on the right track? You got it. Fromson describes a love that extends beyond individuals. It's a life for humanity, a genuine concern for the well-being of others. It's recognizing our shared humanity and acting with compassion.
Okay, so love is one key to breaking those chains. What else?
He also emphasizes the role of reason, not just blindly accepting what we're told, but using critical thinking skills to analyze what's going on around us, making choices based on logic, evidence, not just blind acceptance.
So it's like combining that heart-centered approach with a clear-headed analysis of the world.
Exactly. And finally, there's productive living. Now, before you picture yourself chained to a desk, remember that Fromson's all about freedom.
Right. Yeah, this can't be about just working harder.
No, it's not about that. Productive living for Fromm is about finding work that lets you express your creativity, your talents, work that allows you to contribute to the world in a way that feels meaningful to you.
Wow. We're already covering so much ground here. Fromm is really challenging us to rethink what freedom even means, not just for ourselves, but for society as a whole.
He is. And we're just scratching the surface. But let's pause here for a moment. Let these ideas sink in a bit before we dive into the next layer of Fromm's thinking.
Yeah, we all need a minute to digest this before we move on.
Back again. Ready to dig into some of those illusions Fromm says are holding us back?
I'm all in. I mean, we already saw that Fromm doesn't shy away from pointing out how we kind of fool ourselves. And last time we were talking about how It's hard to even recognize those chains, especially when they're like baked into our culture.
Right, and Fromm calls this the illusion of individuality.
Yeah.
And he's not saying that being an individual is BAD. Like, he actually sees that as super important for real freedom. But what he's getting at is this idea that we're all these totally unique, self-made people, completely separate from all the social stuff happening around us.
It's like we think we're making our own choices, but we're really just playing out roles that society has already written for us. Kind of creepy when you think about it that way.
Exactly. Fromm says a lot of our beliefs, our values, even our deep down desires, they're all shaped by the culture we're swimming in. We absorb all these ideas from our families, our education, the media. It's everywhere, constantly shaping how we see the world.
It's like that saying, fish don't know they're in water. We're surrounded by this sea of social influence, but we don't even realize how much it's shaping us.
Perfect analogy. Fromm would totally agree. He'd say becoming aware of that water, that social context, is like step one to understanding ourselves better. And it's the first step towards breaking free from all those limiting beliefs and behaviors.
Okay, so that illusion of individuality is one chain we need to break. What other illusions are we dealing with here?
Another big one is what he calls the illusion of freedom through consumption. This one's huge in our culture, right? We're constantly told that happiness is just a purchase away. A new car, the latest gadget, the perfect outfit, whatever. Just buy, 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 and you'll be happy.
Yeah, it's like we think the more stuff we have, the freer we are. But Fromm's saying that's a trap, isn't he?
Totally. It's an illusion of freedom.
Hmm.
Real freedom. It doesn't come from all the stuff we accumulate. It comes from working on ourselves, building real relationships, engaging with the world in a way that's true to who we are.
So it's more about experiences, relationships, growing as a person, those things that actually bring lasting fulfillment, not just the temporary high of buying something new.
Right on. Fromm would say all those material possessions, yeah, they might make us feel good for a little bit, but they can't really address the deeper stuff, the deeper needs we have as humans. In fact, they can even become another set of chains, weighing us down with debt, keeping us on that treadmill of always wanting more.
Always chasing the next thing, never really feeling satisfied. Yeah, I know that feeling.
And it's a cycle Fromm really wants us to break free from. He's calling us to question those messages that basically tell us happiness equals buying stuff, and to look for fulfillment in those more authentic ways we were talking about.
And this all ties back to those ideas we discussed before, right? Love, reason, productive living, those are the keys to unlocking real freedom. They're also like the antidotes to these illusions that are keeping us trapped.
You're making those connections. Fromm saw these principles as totally interconnected, essential for living a life that's truly free and meaningful.
So how does love help us break free from those illusions? We were talking about love being much bigger than just romantic love, right?
It is. And that bigger love, that love for humanity, it helps us see past that illusion of individuality. It reminds us that we're not just these isolated islands, but interconnected beings who thrive on connection and compassion.
So it's about recognizing our shared humanity, extending kindness and empathy to others, even those who might be different from us.
Exactly. It's seeing ourselves reflected in each other and acting from that understanding.
And how does reason help us break free?
Well, reason is like that superpower that helps us see through the illusions society throws at us, especially those illusions that try to convince us that happiness is all about stuff. It's using critical thinking to analyze all the messages we're constantly bombarded with and making choices based on our values.
So it's not just accepting everything we hear, it's questioning it, evaluating it, making conscious choices based on logic and evidence.
Right. And it's not just consuming information, it's going deeper, reflecting on what we believe, challenging those assumptions we've been carrying around.
Okay, and then there's productive living. How does that fit into all of this?
Remember, Fromm's not talking about just grinding away at work. For him, productive living is about finding work that lets you express your creativity and contribute to the world in a way that means something to you.
So it's about finding fulfillment and meaning in your work, not just chasing a paycheck or climbing that ladder.
Exactly. Fromm would say, when we're engaged in work that aligns with our values and allows us to use our talents to make a positive impact, well, that's when we start to break free from that consumerist mindset that keeps us always wanting more.
It's about creating, contributing, making a difference. It's finding that place where our passions and our skills meet the needs of the world.
You got it. Fromm will believe that kind of meaningful work is essential. It gives us a sense of purpose, allows us to contribute to something larger than ourselves.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. Love, reason, productive living. But it's a pretty big task, isn't it? Challenging these deeply ingrained norms and illusions. Where do we even start?
You're right, it's not easy. But Fromm gives us a starting point, self-awareness. He says we have to become conscious of those forces that are shaping our thoughts, our feelings, our actions.
So step one is just noticing those chains, those illusions we've bought into without even realizing it.
Exactly. Once we see them, we can start asking those tough questions. Does this belief actually serve me? Is this desire really mine, or did society plant it there? Am I making choices that are true to who I am, or am I just going with the flow?
It's like turning on a light in those dark corners of our minds, seeing what's really there. It might be uncomfortable, but it's also freeing.
I like that, turning on the light. Fromm would say that self-reflection is crucial for breaking free. It's about becoming the captain of your own ship, steering your own course.
But self-awareness isn't enough, is it? At some point, we have to actually do something, make changes.
Absolutely. Fromm talks about active freedom, making conscious choices that line up with our values and what we want in life.
So recognizing the chains isn't enough. We have to actively break free from them.
Right. And that might mean making some tough choices, challenging norms, stepping outside our comfort zone, maybe even facing pushback from others.
It takes courage, right?
Yeah.
It's easier to just go with the flow, even if it means losing ourselves a little bit along the way. But Fromm's saying real freedom is worth the risk, the discomfort.
He is. Fromm believed that living a life that's truly authentic, well, that takes courage. It takes a willingness to stand up for what you believe in, even when it's not easy.
It sounds like a journey that takes not just courage, but a real commitment to growing and evolving as a person.
It does. But Fromm believed the rewards are huge. He argued that true freedom, that feeling of being fully awake and alive, that's the most fulfilling experience a person can have.
And this is where Fromm's vision of a better future comes in, right? He's not just talking about individuals breaking free. He wants us to build a society that supports that kind of authentic living for everyone.
You got it. Fromm's vision was for a society that values human well-being, cooperation, creativity. He thought that kind of society would help people be more free, loving, engaged in life.
So it's a cycle. As we become more aware and break free from our own chains, we can help create a society that supports others in doing the same.
Exactly. Fromm saw it as an ongoing process, a journey of growth and evolution for individuals and for society as a whole.
This is powerful stuff. Fromm really makes us question our ideas about freedom, about who we are, about how society works. But it's not all doom and gloom, is it? There's a sense of hope in all of this.
Absolutely. Fromm's critique can be tough to hear, but ultimately his message is about hope and empowerment. He believes we have the ability to break free from those chains and create a better world for ourselves and future generations.
I think we need another pause here to let all this sink in. Fromm's ideas are challenging, but they're also really inspiring.
Definitely take your time. We'll be back soon to wrap up our deep dive into Fromm's work and talk about how we can apply all of these insights to our own lives.
All right, we're back, ready to wrap up this deep dive into Fromm's Beyond the Chains of Illusion. I don't know about you, but whew, my brain is definitely full after all of that.
It's a lot to process, that's for sure. But, Fromm's not just pointing fingers and saying, look at all these problems. He actually wants us to, do something about it,
Yeah.
to break free.
So how do we do that? He talks about love, reason, productive living, all these big concepts, but how do we actually put those into practice in our daily lives?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It's easy to get kind of overwhelmed by how big all of this is. But Fromm gives us some practical tools. He talks a lot about critical thinking and not just passively taking in information, but really questioning the messages we're getting all the time.
So being more discerning about what we're consuming, especially from advertising and media, like becoming a media detective.
Exactly. Ask yourself, does this actually line up with what I believe in? Is this promoting real human connection or just feeding my ego? Is this encouraging me to be my best self or trying to sell me something?
And Fromm would say that self-awareness is a huge part of this too, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about looking at the world around us, but turning that critical lens inward, paying attention to our own thoughts, feelings, reactions. Where are we feeling resistance? Where are we holding ourselves back? Maybe out of fear or just because we're afraid to stand out.
So recognizing those internal chains, those limiting beliefs that keep us playing small.
Right. And just as important, pay attention to what brings you joy, what energizes you, what gives you a sense of purpose. Fromm would say those things are clues to where your true path lies.
It's a lifelong process, this inner work, but it's the foundation for breaking free, isn't it?
It is. And then comes the even harder part, actually putting those insights into action. Because it's not enough to just see the chains. We have to actually choose to break free.
So this isn't just about thinking differently, it's about living differently.
Exactly. It might mean changing your habits, your job, even some of your relationships. It might mean challenging those norms, stepping outside of your comfort zone, maybe even facing pushback from people. But Fromm believed that living in alignment with your values, that's what real freedom is all about.
It's taking those small, consistent actions, right? That's how we chip away at the chains, both within ourselves and in the world around us. Kind of like those ripples that spread out when you throw a pebble in a pond.
I love that image. Fromm believed that even small acts of love, reason, authentic living, they can create ripple effects. It's not about overnight transformation, but about making those gradual shifts in how we think, feel, and act.
You know, it's funny, we start off talking about how Fromm critiques society, but his solutions aren't about like overthrowing the system or starting a revolution. It's much more individual, focused on changing ourselves from the inside out.
That's what makes his approach so unique. He knew that real change has to start with us. We can't create a better society if we haven't done the work on ourselves first. Like Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world.
Fromm believed that as more and more people break free from those chains, all those systems and structures that seem so solid, well, they start to crumble because they're not built on something real, something authentic.
Exactly. And that's pretty empowering, don't you think? That we have the power to make a difference, not just in our own lives, but in the world, just by choosing to live more authentically.
Totally. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Beyond the Chains of Illusion, what's the one thing you want listeners to remember?
I'd say this. True freedom is a journey. It's not a destination. It's about constantly questioning, evolving, and making sure your life is aligned with what you truly value. It's choosing love over fear, reason over blind acceptance, and expressing yourself authentically instead of just conforming.
And remembering that even with all the pressure and noise of modern life, that capacity for freedom, for real joy and connection, it's within each of us.
Absolutely. So take Fromm's ideas and run with them. Start noticing those chains, those beliefs and behaviors that are holding you back, and then bravely start to loosen their grip.
Yeah.
Step into that bigger, more authentic version of yourself. You never know what kind of ripple effects you might create.
That's a great place to end. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Erich Fromm's Beyond the Chains of Illusion. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, keep breaking free.